Basically, self-transformation means transforming yourself, becoming a better version of yourself. Psychology, of course, is the know-how up here to convert yourself, change yourself, whatever the hell that is. The psychology of self-transformation is, how do I use up here to change the entire person, the entire lifestyle that I'm living? And the challenge with personal transformation is really twofold. The first challenge with self-transformation is that human beings are living like in an eclipse. You know, with the eclipse of the sun, there's some shadow. The sun is maybe in front of the moon, for example, or sorry, the earth. The moon is in front of the sun, so we can't see the sun, for example. It's eclipsed by the moon, and we have darkness. And the problem we have as human beings is that often, to some degree or other, our awareness of ourselves is eclipsed. We have darkness. And the problem we have as human beings is that often, to some degree or other, our awareness of ourselves is eclipsed. Or another word you might use is occult. Okay? Of course, we think of the occult as magic and mysteries and all that, but also to occult something is to obscure it, to cover it, okay, in some ways you can't see it. And the biggest challenge we have is we can't really see ourselves. Another angle on this, perhaps, we have the idea of the Jungian idea, Carl Gustav Jung, of the shadow. And the shadow is that aspect of ourselves which we are not aware of, called the shadow self. So that's the first problem. The first problem of self-transformation is there's aspects of ourselves which we are not aware of. Aspects of ourselves which we are in denial of. And often we have a thing which goes with denial, which is projection. That which we disown in ourselves, we tend to project onto others. A lot of people who are into bullying behavior, for example, will often feel that the person they bully is somehow insulting them, somehow not good, somehow they're similar to somebody that they remember from earlier in their life that they didn't like or was abusive to them. And what's actually happening there is they are looking at somebody, and that somebody is representing some aspect of themselves that they do not like and that they're in denial of, and they're projecting their self-dislike onto this other person. So the bully or the abusive person is to some degree abusing themselves. To some degree it's an aspect of themselves that are in denial. When we look at a bigot, for example, a bigoted person is in denial of some aspect of themselves and they project it onto somebody else. If we take, for example, World War II, Adolf Hitler and his hatred of the Jews, there was something that he didn't like about himself, and that him and his group of people, we call this in Jungian psychology the egregore, E-G-R-E-G-O-R-E, the egregore, the group energy as it were, was such that they hated the Jews. They didn't hate the Jews because the Jews did anything badly. They hated the Jews because groups like that, so just the individuals were in denial of some aspect of themselves, and the group was in denial of some aspect of the group, and they projected all their inadequacies, all their insecurities, all their hatred onto a scapegoat, which is also a Jewish concept because it comes up in the Old Testament, that back in the old days, they used to take a goat and they used to bring it to a cliff, and all the sins of the people would be projected onto the goat, and they threw the goat off the cliff, hence the term the scapegoat. The goat represented the evil of the people, and the Jewish people were the scapegoat. They were just there to take the angst of these German fascists. So that's a very extreme example. So it can happen individually or on a group level. So that's the first thing. We tend to be in denial of certain aspects of ourselves. It's very hard to transform yourself when you don't even know yourself. The second thing is we are very habitual. And the older we get, the more habitual we are. And it's very, very hard to change our habits. In theory, theoretically, we can change a habit in 21 days. Yet, how difficult it is for human beings to change. This is probably the biggest challenge we have. We more or less know what we have to do, but somehow we cannot make ourselves do it. So what have these two things got to do with the psychology of self-transformation? Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves is, why do I need to transform myself? I need to transform myself because in some way or other, I am not fulfilling myself. There is some irritation, there is some anxiety, there's maybe a lack of depth or emotionality in my life, maybe inner deadness, there is some kind of maybe lack of joyfulness or spontaneity. There's something missing in my life, and I want to fulfill that missing something. So if we take it as a given that we're living in denial at some level, we're lacking awareness on some level, and on the other side that even the things we know we should do, we cannot do, well, where does that leave us with the point of view of self-transformation? The first thing we have to realize about self-transformation is that it's not as important as we think to become something different on the outside. There's so many people these days in self-improvement and self-development, and they're trying to become something they're not. They're trying to appear as super successful at everything. And there is a tendency in this idea of personality development, self-development, to try and be some kind of ubermensch, some kind of superman or overman or overwoman or overperson or whatever you want to call it. And there's a falseness in that, because you are fine the way you are. I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. One is to try and be something, and the other is to try and be yourself. And my belief is we should try and be ourselves rather than try and be something external. Yes, we do need some level of successfulness, be able to speak well, think well, be effective in the world, of course. If we try to base ourselves on some kind of external idea of success, we end up playing a part. And we end up being like a cheesy drama TV show actor. You know, these like American TV shows, The Bold and the Beautiful, these very cornball type of shows. Will end up being like these really terrible actors. Not that they're terrible actors, but they have to learn the lines very quickly. They make an episode every day. Lines aren't very good to begin with. But we'll end up being like that in our lives. We'll be cheesy kind of people, not real people. Okay? So I believe we should be ourselves, not too worried about the externals. It's something we have to be aware of. If we go too much down the road of perfectionism, you'll never be satisfied. And it's not necessary to be perfect. The most important thing in life actually is to be happy with yourself. And you'd be surprised if you are truly happy with yourself and you are truly self-confident and competent in your life, you'll be surprised at how many people will support you in your endeavors. Okay? So really be happy in yourself and competent as a person. That's the first thing to get out of the way. Moving on from that, what we have to realize in self-transformation is that it requires a lot of work. And these days nobody likes to talk about work. But the reality is, surely this is the greatest work there is in your life. Becoming the best version of yourself, the biggest version of yourself, surely that's worth a few years, a couple of decades even, maybe more. And it is something you can work on throughout your life, is becoming a bigger and better version of yourself. So we need a lot of patience, because we need to delve deep and find out what makes us tick as people. And there's certain things which we can do, which I've suggested on this channel and other videos, which is self-exploration. So things like diary writing. We write a diary about our life story, where we came from, who we are, exploring ourselves, meditation, self-development programs. There's all these sort of practical things we can do. But the most important thing is not so much the activities. There's lots of activities you can do which will help you become more aware of yourself. The most important thing is the reflecting upon these experiences, looking at your life, reflecting upon what happened to me today, writing my life story, making sense of that life story, working through working through my issues, and then discovering that some of these things are perceptions, judgments on my side, which are not necessarily objective. Because initially we tend to think, I am right, others are wrong, I'm the victim, and if only things were different. And when we start working on ourselves, like psychotherapy and group therapy and reading self-help books, self-help courses, and writing a life story and stuff, initially we have this apparently objective view where things are like this, and if only things were like that, it would be better. And over a period of time, you'll start to realize that some of your views are skewed, and you're not as objective as you'd realize, and sometimes you're not the victim, and sometimes you're causing your own problems, or you're perceiving things a certain way. And we need to work at that for months and even years to gain perspectives. And the second thing we have to do for self-transformation is where the psychology of self-transformation is. That first part is reflecting on your journey. And I really feel it's a journey. Don't think in terms of, if I achieve this, I'll get there. Reflecting upon your journey, okay? As we gain those reflections, we can gain perspectives on what to do and what really needs to be transformed, rather than things which are not so important, because it's very hard to change every character trait, etc. And moving on to how we can really transform ourselves, the major thing is congruency, that what we're trying to achieve is congruent with our value system, is congruent with our essential personality of who we really are, and what I like to call our true desires, our heart's desires, rather than external desires. There's a pattern inside ourselves which we need to fulfill ourselves. Our soul destiny on this earth, there's a certain pattern, and aligning ourselves with that. And these are the things we need to work on. So the biggest thing I feel with transformation is people try to bite off too much. They try too much to focus on externals. And what you really need to do is gain more perspective, see the wood for the trees, and start with some low-lying fruit. So don't try and change everything overnight. I felt, this is trapped myself many a time, of trying to change everything. Well, first of all, you don't have to change everything. And secondly, what can you realistically work on? What can you realistically change? Because there's many things you can't change. The most important thing to change, if we're talking about the psychology of self-transformation, is learning to love yourself, learning to be happy with yourself, and developing a self-confidence which comes from a person who knows themselves, who is at home in their own skin and not trying to be somebody else or do something else. And that inner stability and that inner maturity, that's the number one thing to change. Second thing, of course, is competencies. Competencies are important. And if you're weak in certain areas of your life and you start becoming aware, this is where the reflecting comes into play, because initially we feel like a victim. We either feel like we can't do something or we feel that other people are unfair. After a while, we see what our weaknesses really are. We see what our strengths really are. We see when we're judging other people, and we see when we're being genuine. And working on building those competencies, like maybe you're too shy, maybe you're too aggressive, maybe you're too passive, maybe you need to network more, maybe you need to go and sharpen the saw and develop your intellect and so on. So there's many different things. So working on loving yourself and getting to know yourself and having inner confidence, and also outer confidence. So we need inner confidence and we need outer competence in life. Another aspect of this we can also look at is inner character development, which is basically having a character. Rather than just being blown by the wind, having some kind of character, having some kind of value system, it's there inside you anyway, and being congruent and aligning that. So this is really the psychology of self-transformation. Psychology of self-transformation is accepting that we're in denial of some degree and not fully aware, accepting also that it is a challenge to change. Then working on learning about ourselves, working on finding out what we need to change, what we don't need to change, and then making practical steps, starting with low-lying fruit. And then as we gain confidence and competence, we can go for bigger and bigger things. Because once you got a winning formula, you just have to scale up that formula. So it's like if you want to take up mountain climbing, would you start by climbing the Eiger? Would you start by climbing Mount Everest? You probably wouldn't. You might go down to your local, whatever the hell it is, place that you learn climbing, and start climbing a wall, and then going on small climbs and big climbs. And over a period of a few years, you build. You keep within your comfort zone, that area of activity that you're happy with, but push it out a little bit, okay? Which gets back to a concept that Stephen Covey likes to talk about, circle of influence. And the circle of influence versus circle of concern. So the circle of influence is whereby what can you affect around you versus what you're concerned about. So initially, you might be very concerned about my outer image and my success and how people think of me. And really, if you get deep down to it, you're actually lacking confidence inside. And that's why you're focused on all the stuff that maybe not really as important as you think when you start to learn to love yourself and respect yourself and all that. So instead of focusing on that circle of concern, you start focusing on the circle of influence. What can I change? What can I do? I can't gain 5 inches of height. I can't change my ethnicity. I can't boost my IQ by 40 points. All these sort of things which I can't do. But what can I do? And what really matters for my personality type? Do I need to become a rich business person? Maybe I need to be an artist. Maybe I need to be a lover. Maybe I need to be a homemaker. Maybe I need to be just a nice all-rounder. Maybe just a sports person. Who do I really need to be? And to do that, we have to self-reflect a little bit and then work on that circle of influence, work on the things that we can change. And of course, as Stephen Covey says, the more you work on things you can change, your circle of influence gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, you have more capacity to do things, and your life becomes more meaningful as you interact with more people or enter that area that you're already into. So this is a brief overview of what I feel is the psychology of self-transformation. Self-transformation is always tough, and you're wasting your time if you're going to try and transform everything. Learn about yourself and work on low-lying fruit initially. Develop your inner confidence, develop your outer competence, and also try and have some kind of value system, some kind of character development, so you're congruent with your inner values of who you really want to be. And then instead of trying to be somebody a certain way in the world, where you're putting out, projecting an image, instead of that, you are who you really are. And then you have this inner glow, inner stability, inner confidence about you. And people will find that very attractive because they feel you're solid. And then you just learn to project that into the world. And that is the key for transformation. The final thing I'll say as well is real transformation should make you happier, more peaceful inside, and not be always irritated and anxious. And there's a very simple evolutionary aspect to this, that we do have a certain amount of angst or irritation. That's that kind of itch which is there to help us grow and develop, which is good. But we should also be able to sit and be happy. So by all means, find ideals, find dreams, and pursue dreams and ideals. But we also, along the way of self-transformation, we need to enjoy the journey and not turn into somebody who's like a machine, trying to achieve many things and you know, write off all these great achievements they had, because you're not here to make endless great achievements. You are here to grow as a person, you are here to enjoy the journey, and you're here to help other people along the way. Okay, so this is some things to think about on this area of the psychology of self-transformation. Big subject, but some things to think about. Okay, hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you next time.